I have to put my oxygen mask on first or I have
Yeah.
nothing else to give. And I think that a lot of people know that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people have gone through experiences of seeing, hey, if I don't do this, it literally doesn't work.
Yeah.
And we still do it.
Mm-hmm. It always starts with a question, right? How well is this working? How
Yeah.
much longer can you continue to do this?
Yeah.
And then it really becomes getting very in touch with yourself.
Yeah.
Like, what is the bare minimum that you need? Nothing elaborate. You don't need a 4-hour morning routine. You
Yeah.
don't need to go buy a journal. You don't need to move. You don't need to join a gym.
Mm-hmm.
Like, literally, what is the most simple thing that you need right
Mm-hmm.
now? On a daily basis, just one and a
Okay.
king for sure.
One and a king?
No, one king.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this weekend I didn't have my king. I forgot to pack it, which I never do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this low level interference that just I'm fuzzy and not foggy, but just like fuzzy.
Do you feel that way with the king too, or no?
No, not at all.
It's interesting because I know everybody says they feel different with the king, and I don't know if I actually used to feel different with the king or if that was placebo or me lying to myself. I don't know, but like now I don't notice a difference, king or not.
Okay.
But what was interesting that when I started to realize something was off with coffee was actually through our weekly walks.
Oh.
I don't know if I told you this.
No.
As I was playing with pulling it out and all that, whatever. And I was starting to notice the difference of like when I went out to drink coffee versus my king. And I was starting to feel like, oh, it's all the same. I actually feel like the same effects. But whenever we would go on walks, I would get coffee and it had no negative effects. And I was like, what is it about Sleeping Tiger coffee that I seem to feel great? I have no issue. Like it was like I just felt great. I had no negative symptoms. And that's the only time. And so then I was starting to wonder like if it was actually something about their coffee or how they made it, if it was something about like actually the metabolism of it, of like drinking it while we're going on like a 5-mile walk and it's like immediately getting like moved or something.
Sure.
Or if it was the social, like heart centered, like I'm really happy. Like if, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's probably all of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because there are times, think about when you're on vacation, right? You drink so much and you eat so much and then you come back and like the number on the scale looks totally different than you would imagine, or it like doesn't sync up. And I think there's so much joy that's happening. You're consuming just what you need. Yeah. Right? You're not over consuming or under consuming. Yeah. And the source always matters. Yeah. And I mean, blood sugar is a real thing. So if you're, and you walk as you're consuming something, I think that could be hugely impactful.
I actually think that's a huge part of it because I think it's so much of what we were like, okay, it's another like stream, like energy stream. And we immediately like walk a lot. Right. Yeah. And I think it's like, I actually metabolize through it. So it doesn't affect me as much versus have it in the morning. I either go on a walk myself or I like exercise. And if I'm going on a walk myself, I don't walk as long as we walk, right? I walk like 30, 45 minutes. Or I'm like doing a workout for like 20, 30 minutes. It's like not the same as like a 5-mile.
Yeah.
So that does make sense actually.
And when I wore my CGM last year, one of the things I toyed with was eating different foods and then walking immediately afterwards. Yeah. And the impact that just a 10-minute walk around my block had was night and day. Yeah. Yes. And I could see it in real time.
I was thinking I should do my CGM again. I'd be very curious.
Yeah.
You know what I was thinking about? Remember when you had like a health podcast?
I do remember when I had a health podcast. That was so long ago. I think that was 2018 and 2019.
I was thinking about that because I was thinking about like how we met.
Yes.
And we met at the Beauty Counter conference. Yeah. And we sat down and I just like immediately connected with you.
Yes.
And I felt like we had so much in common.
Totally.
And you had this health podcast and I was thinking about it this morning. And I was like, that was so random. And I actually know nothing about that. Like, and then you stopped at it. You were doing it with somebody, I think.
I was doing it with a friend.
Started to do other things in your life or whatever. But I'm like, how did that even come about? Like, I think that's an interesting, like, central
the
point.
podcast.
Yeah.
So my friend and I had both gone to IIN. Kind of, we overlapped. And she was the one who said, hey, let's do something with our knowledge and our education and just sort of the life experience and wisdom we both had up to that point. And I brought more of the coaching aspect, and she had like logistics and like ideas and concepts, and we married it, worked it. It was great. And we did it for maybe 18 months, 2 years. I think we had almost 100 in the can. And there were two things happened. One, we didn't have a tangible a product that we were selling. So it was, at that point, it was just kind of like a hobby for us, which was fine, but we needed to make a decision if we were fine with it being a hobby or if we wanted to elevate it and take it to the next level. And we both agreed that it was time to elevate it and take it to the next level, but we didn't know what that was. And honestly, what the next level was. We weren't interested in like whether it was consulting or coaching or packages or whatever. And then the other thing that happened was COVID started. And I think, I think we did our last episode in like April of 2020. It was a heavy time in the world with so much uncertainty. And we had also kind of come to the end of the conversations that we wanted to be having. Coming up with content ideas was not as easy as it once was. So we just kind of took the science and sunsetted it. Yeah.
Why did you go through IIN?
I went through IIN because at that moment in my life, learning about nutrition was what I thought was the next step on my journey. So I've always been the kid or the adult. I think like so many women you've talked to here and just in life, in your containers, have had a complicated relationship with food. And I spent years, decades dieting. I figured out how to not do that anymore. But before I got to that moment, IIN was my next step along the way. Well, gosh, if I can master nutrition, then I can, drop the 10 or 20 pounds that I was wanting to deal with. And through that process, I learned that, and I knew before, but it's never going to be about the food ever, right? Because they teach you 100 different, nutritional ways of eating. They're all backed by science, right? They all serve their purpose, but what's the purpose?
It's interesting to me that, you're going through that, which a lot of women do. And your approach was, I'm going to go to school for it. Instead of like, I'm just going to have someone else coach me through it.
At that moment in time, that's where I was. But I had spent, that was 20, I was already 20 years into this journey. And I had been to therapy. I had taken, fen in the 90s, right? I had worked with hypnotherapists. I had done every diet under the sun. I'd bought every book, whatever it was. I hadn't at that moment yet worked with a coach one-on-one. I hadn't. And then I did that, and that helped tremendously. Like, I think that was part of, that was the beginning of the end for me. Well,
I'm just pointing out because it's like the automatic, the way you go is I'm going to become the one that could teach this. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, I would do the same thing, but it's just, when did you really start down this journey of like, I guess I would call it deeper inner healing, right? Like, when did that all come about? Because you were in a very busy, chaotic career for a while. Like, you have your kids. Like, when did this all start?
It's, The short answer is it's probably always, it's
Mm-hmm.
been a backdrop to my life.
Yeah.
And I started where I knew to start. I started going to therapy when I was in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And everything works for a while until it doesn't. And so I just kind of followed the breadcrumbs.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of very, very deep spiritual work, I would say it's really only been within the past probably 4 or 5 years. And that's through me realizing that everything only worked for a time
Mm-hmm.
and a purpose. And maybe there's a different way.
Yeah.
There has to be a different way, right?
Yeah.
Because I can have all of the knowledge in the world. You can have all of the degrees and the credentials. But if something's still not working,
Mm-hmm.
you keep going. And so what's left to explore? Where have I not gone before?
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, like through all the different iterations of your career, for example, maybe you can talk about that and kind of like that trajectory, because I'm curious about the through line there.
I could tell you what I think the through line is, but maybe you see something totally different.
Yeah.
I mean, my early career, I think I've spent like a lot of people in their 20s, right?
Mm-hmm.
You graduate from college, you have your degree, and you go and you do what is socially acceptable. And for me and my peer set, I went and lived in New York for 10 years, and I had a career in sports marketing. I worked for the National Basketball Association, which was amazing. And like really amazing. I have some experiences and memories from that time that I don't know, like a handful of the people on the planet,
Yeah.
Can say they were there for that. And so that was super fun until it wasn't, right? It didn't light me up anymore. And I remember feeling badly that I had this amazing job, this great job, but I was not fulfilled. And I remember telling my dad, hey, I'm going to quit my job and I want to go and get my master's in social work. And he said, okay, but are you sure?
Yeah.
Basically. And yeah, okay, fine. So I got my master's in social work because I wanted to help people. I've always been a helper. And that was great. That was super fun because I was helping people. It didn't feel like enough because you don't know how much of an impact you're having. And that was hard to manage, but I learned. I had great mentors who said, Stacey, you show up and you do the best you can, and you hope at one moment in time, they remember that there's people like you out there who can help you, and there are resources and support and people who love, right? So, okay. And then my next iteration was, once I found helping people, it's just kind of evolved and morphed over time. I found coaching, or coaching found me. And I've been in that space for 15, 16 years, always helping in different capacities. Yeah.
Well, what do you think the through line is?
I think the through line is that I love to help people feel better.
And where does that come from?
It comes from my own me, that I'm always wanting to feel better. And not that I feel terrible on a daily basis, but like life is lifey, right? And sometimes we need help and support and tools. And I've been through a lot in my life and have experienced so much and been able to avail myself of so many talented doctors and mentors and practitioners and healers and helpers that I don't want anyone to spend a moment longer than they need to feeling whatever it is, whether it's stuck or depressed or, something even worse.
Yeah. You lost your mother when you were young.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how you feel like that impacted your career path.
I've thought about this a lot. I was 19 when she died, and I have always felt and believed that she died teaching me everything I needed to know. There were a lot of questions. I mean, if she could come, if I could have dinner with her, and I'd have a list of questions for her.
Mm-hmm.
But I always had that confidence from within that even if I didn't know the answer to a question, I would know the next place to start.
Mm.
She somehow instilled that confidence in me to know that self-confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very comfortable in what I would say are intense situations. So I'm very comfortable around death and grief and in a bereavement phase, probably because I've been through it myself now a couple of times. But I'm not afraid of big feelings or big emotions or chaos or big situations.
Yeah.
I don't remember young me feeling that way, but me now feels that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to think that it's just a byproduct of my life experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like she's just so present.
Yeah.
Like, and I feel like she's like just been like, I mean, like literally an angel, like pulling you these different places, like pulling you down the journey, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting for me, like when I look at kind of like the bigger energies of your life, like, and you look at some different sides of your personality, and I feel like there's like the Aries, like working for the NBA, like going to events, like that whole phase, and then it's like, and now I'm in my divine mother phase. You know, it's like it's like a very clear trajectory, and I just feel like I always feel like she like kind of nudges you down these like paths.
I definitely think she does. I mean, I don't remember what it was like when she was mothering me at 14, but I know when I'm mothering my twins, at 14, I do tap into the experiences and the feelings that were around our relationship. Yeah. Without even realizing that I do that. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about this. Carrie was just on, and in between recording, she was talking about, because she does a lot of like grief work as a psychic with people, and she was talking about how recently there's been kind of another big wave of people transitioning off planet. Obviously, we had everything that happened with, COVID and all of that, and I think a lot of people are looking at this now and like having to face, death, and how do we move through that. And you have with your parents, like these two really, like, I think contrasting experiences, it's like very different times in your life and like different tools. And I would love to hear from you, like, what has helped you move, like what felt different between those, and kind of your process of moving through that grief, and what's helped you.
I'm so glad you've asked this question, because I've had this conversation in my head for a really long time. And even the concept of writing or documenting or sharing with the world. And I've hesitated for one reason. And it's that whenever there's two, right, you're naturally comparing. But how do you compare a mother and a father, right? You can't. So they're not even standalone experiences. They're very connected. So thank you for asking that question. When you're 19, or at least for me, it's so young. I think back to my 19-year-old self. You can barely tie your shoes, right? I was in college, and
I don't think I had eaten a vegetable yet.
Yeah, you forget
in my life,
eat, right? You're like, I don't know. I guess I should go to bed or study. I don't know. Maybe, right? And to be honest, having the university experience at that time delayed my grief experience, but I wouldn't have changed it. I was able to I stayed in school. I was able to graduate on time. And it wasn't until after I graduated and was living and working for a couple of years where I realized, oh, wow, I'm kind of in a delayed grief moment. And so I processed my grief then and was able to get myself into therapy. And that was life-changing. That first experience with a therapist where I could talk with someone about what was going on in my head, and she could not only help me make sense of it and understand it, but label it, and then give me something to like almost see. so I could understand it and then I knew what I was working with. Then I could kind of go through the process. When my dad died, I had all of that. I had that experience of my mother. Plus I had, 30 plus years, 19 to 50, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, more than that. So I had a lot of life experience. That was also different. I had my own family.
Mm-hmm.
That was different. But what really made the difference is I didn't know how to grieve, and I didn't know how to prepare for someone so close to me dying because I was 19.
Yeah.
My family didn't know how to do that. I didn't even know that that was a possibility. And when my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, we knew it was going to be quick. I didn't know how quick it was going to be, but I knew it was coming,
Mm-hmm.
and I was so willing to be in the process. Like, I wanted to be there. We lived, 3,000 miles away. I was able to be with him a lot. My husband was great with my kids. And so I was physically able to be there, and I wasn't afraid. Like, I really wanted to be part of the process for myself and for him as an honoring of our relationship. And that was profoundly different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What allowed you to be not afraid? Because I think a lot of people, everybody, like, people don't always know how to deal with that. And some people lean in and they, they want to be with them. And some people, don't, because it's too difficult.
I'd say the experience of losing my mom.
Yeah.
For one. For two, other things that made it easier were all of just my life experience and my wisdom.
Yeah.
Right? But really it was me. I will dive headfirst into, big things.
Yeah.
And I've always said, give it to me all at once, right? So God gives me twins, right? So, okay, now who's laughing, right? But to me, changing 2 diapers at the same time, or having 2, 2-month-olds spit up on me at the same time is a heck of a lot easier than doing it another way, right? If I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, any parent's in it to win it. It doesn't matter if you have 1 kid or 4 kids or septuplets, it doesn't matter. But I've always been the give it to me all at once kind of girl. So I was just willing to dive into that pool as an honoring of our relationship and everything that my dad meant to me and taught me and mentored me and showed me in life. And for my own self, I didn't want to get to the other side and have any regrets. I mean, I couldn't imagine not being there. I just couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
It was the only way for me. Yeah. And I know it's scary for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be. It's uncomfortable. Of course it's uncomfortable because someone's dying and maybe there's unfinished business. And I know I'm very fortunate that I had a great relationship with my dad, and I could speak my mind and he could speak his mind, and we could have, even if we couldn't have some of those conversations, I wasn't afraid of it. I know people come with all sorts of baggage and past history that really can be uncomfortable to have to deal with, but it's a heck of a lot more uncomfortable when the person's gone than when they're there. Yeah.
I mean, I certainly learned a lot, like, watching you walk through that experience. And it was interesting for me. And I know we talked about this a little bit. Like, I don't know. I think about phases of my life that I've yet to enter, and I'm like kind of looking around, like, what's going on over there. And something that I know I've told you before is I feel like I don't really hear that many people talking about just like the dynamics of when you lose your parents. And I think about like watching my parents lose their parents, and now like watching my parents lose their siblings. And I'm like, I can't even imagine what that's like, you know, like that feels so far away from where I'm at, which you never really know if it is or not, right?
Yeah.
But it's different with my parents because I don't talk to them as often as I talk to you. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And like I'm also not having those types of conversations with my parents. Like they're not, you know, letting me into that part of it because it's different. They're my parent, not my friend, you know?
Yes,
So
yes.
not that they're, you know,
I know what you mean. Yeah.
And I think I'm curious, like what you would say to people who are maybe like in that phase of their life where it's like that very weird liminal stage. And we talked about this a bit. It's like, okay, both my parents aren't earthside anymore. And now like here I am and I have it's a very different energy. Like, how have you navigated that? And like, what advice would you give for people who are kind of in that strange, like, space?
The first thing I would say is if both parents are alive or any parent is alive and you have unfinished business, go take care of that unfinished business. Even if it's writing them a letter or maybe it's going to therapy or talking to someone so you can make sense of it so you can understand, do I even need to broach the subject? But addressing whatever it is before they pass, because once they're gone, it's really a lot harder and it becomes more complicated. So that's one part that I would say. You don't have to do anything with the information, but just take care of it for your own self, for one. And for two, it's an unpleasantness of life for sure. No one wants to plan for a parent's death. But at the same time, it's going to happen, right? It's just going to happen. There are a lot of people out there who kind of help with death ahead of time. And maybe it's talking to somebody like that, or I don't really have a great answer for that, except except know what you need, right? Know what you want to come from it. I mean, if you want to repair a relationship, okay, fine. And if you don't want to, that's okay too. But know yourself and have those reasons and proceed.
Yeah.
It can be very unmooring, I will say, for a really long time. Really long time. I dreaded getting news about my dad dying because it meant that I would be, parentless.
Yeah.
And it's not true, right? I have parents. They're not earthside anymore, but they were with me for a really, really, really long time, and they still are with me. They're here now. They're everywhere in my home. The relationship changes, and that can be freeing for a lot of people as well. A ton of people. I mean, I have to say, there were things that my dad sent me over the years, and once he died, a couple months later, I was like, I don't have to keep this anymore, because not that he would even care that I was holding on to something, but there's just something inside, right? That I'm still a child and he was my dad, and out of respect, he gave it to me, and now it can be gone. So there can be a lot of freedoms that come with it as well.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to go visit all the time or worry about what parents are going to think, right? It's kind of fun. It makes me laugh, those things you see online about how my childhood dreams are now my adult goals, right? My childhood dreams would be, I don't care what my parents think. Well, now I actually really do. I want their input.
Yeah. Well, it's just interesting that I think that space of life where it's like, no matter how much of an adult I am, like when I'm a grandparent, I'm still a child.
Yeah.
You know, and those like archetypes that we're in. And I wanted to ask you about this. And this is related to like, moving through those phases of your life, but just in general, like I mean, this is something I know not of. Like, you have twins, and I feel like a lot of mothers really struggle to, I mean, I hate this like verbiage. It's like balance everything. And I want to really, because I know you work with a lot of very like, you work with female leaders. You know, I think there's a lot of dynamics that come with that I want to like dive into here. And I know that moms struggle. I mean, they tell me this, like, well, you know, I can't because of my kids. I have to take care of my kids. And I think even like navigating a loss is one example of like balancing the process, like what you need for your own grief and your own space, but then also, you know, supporting your kids or like how all of that. And so I'm just curious whether it's related to this or any other areas in your life, because you do, I think it's one of the things interesting to me. I've watched you, you know, with your kids and how fully you show up for them, but you very fully show up for yourself, like you very, very fully. And I think a lot of people say like feel like they can't or they don't know how to do that. And there's, I think, all these pressures that come when you're like in leadership roles in general, and you're not used to being supported, or you feel like everybody else's needs have to come first. How have you navigated that? Like, what mindset has helped you with that and keep that all kind of in balance and show up for yourself?
First of all, it's bumpy. It's totally bumpy. And just when you think you have a handle on it, something shifts.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I'm going to say. And the second thing is, I learned a long time ago that, you know, balance is basically for a second, right? If if you take one of those old fashioned scales, it's a second, literally. And that just can't work in everyday life. But the word fit, it's almost like a puzzle, right? You're putting together a puzzle all of the time, and sometimes the pieces work and sometimes they don't, but you can kind of get things to work and to come together. I would say I truly am a believer in the put your mask on first. And I've had this scenario where I haven't put my mask on first. And it works for a little while where I can take care of everybody else's needs. But eventually I am pouring from an absolutely empty cup and it's bone dry, and you're, practically on life support. So it just doesn't work. Now, there are moments in my motherhood where I couldn't give myself enough oxygen. So I took what I could get at that moment in time, and I just had to make do. And maybe it's a day or a week or a month. I know it's going to shift eventually. So that's kind of one way that I think about that. And then I've really gotten creative over the years. And in fact, so the very first day we came home with the kids, it was the middle of the day, we go to bed, and I wake up the next morning and one of my children was screaming. And I was like, oh my gosh, I guess I have to get up now, right? And I realized, 4 hours later, I hadn't gone to the bathroom, I hadn't brushed my teeth, I was a hot mess, and this could not go on. So the second day my kids were home with me, never to leave, I set my alarm for a god-awful early hour just so I could get up, brush my teeth, and have a cup of coffee before they got up. Because I was so new. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew if I went to the bathroom, had a cup of coffee, and brushed my teeth, I could make it through until I could have a glass of water or eat something, right? And I still do that today. I get up before my entire family. Sometimes it's, 2 hours before. I do, like on a day when I leave for the airport. If I'm leaving for the airport at 5:00, I'm up at 3:30 because I need to. Yeah,
you're texting me and I'm just going to sleep.
Exactly.
I got to push our coffee date because I'm going to bed right now.
But that taking care of myself, and it's not always exactly what I need, but I try to give myself something.
I mean, I love that because it's like the simple things work, and I think it's like I mean, I obviously learn a lot from you, and I watch how you do your things, and I'm like, it really is like, you got to get up early. You just got to get up early.
Just have
it's
to
like
get up.
that simple.
Yeah. And it doesn't need to be hours. In the beginning, it was 15 minutes because that's all I could do. But I had 15 minutes. Yeah.
Let's go back to, realizing I have to put my oxygen mask on first, or I have
Yeah.
nothing else to give. And I think that a lot of people know that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people have gone through experiences of seeing, hey, if I don't do this, it literally doesn't work.
Yeah.
And we still do it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't have kids, but I do it in other ways.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how do we act? Like, there's all kinds of things we know, and we even live the experience. And we realize it doesn't work. Like, how do we actually get that in our bodies and live from that knowing and change the pattern?
I think it always starts with a question, right? How well is this working?
Mm-hmm.
How much longer are, not you in general, but like, how
Yeah.
much longer can you continue to do this?
Yeah.
And a lot of times when I'm with someone, that's when the tears come.
Yeah.
I can't now. Like, it's not one more day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then it really becomes getting very in touch with yourself.
Yeah.
Like, what is the bare minimum that you need?
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Nothing elaborate. You don't need a 4-hour morning routine. You don't need to go buy a journal. You don't need to move. You don't need to join a gym.
Mm-hmm.
Like, literally, what is the most simple thing that you need right now?
And what do people say?
Oh my gosh, a nap a lot of times, right?
Same.
Like,
yeah.
It's often, it's just, I just need to sit. I need to be. But sitting and being brings a whole bunch of chitter chatter, right? And then those tracks start, and then I should be doing. No, we're going to learn. There has to be, if you're going to break a habit or a pattern before you start a new one, there is going to be a tremendous amount of discomfort, right? So there's the discomfort of, I'm going to run myself empty and dry.
Yeah.
And then there's this discomfort of, I'm going to try something new, and I'm going to fumble, and I'm not going to be sure if it's working, but I know that I can't stay doing this.
Yeah.
This has to be better.
Where do you think that guilt comes from? Or like, if it's guilt or something else, like of always needing to put everybody else first. Like, I know there's the mom. I know there's like a very real like mom.
Yeah.
Like I know. Like, but I think even outside of that, like, and I'm orienting from like women in leadership position, I mean women in general.
Yeah.
But like in leadership positions, I feel like that, like the female entrepreneur, or like wanting to start your own business and all the things that come up with this. Like, why do you think there's this natural thing of everybody else comes first, and here I am like barely surviving, not getting oxygen?
I think it's old wiring. I think it's default programming that we've been told, we've seen modeled for us.
Yeah.
And it just becomes a part of us. And until you actually stop and have the conversation that says, wait a second, do you actually believe that?
Yeah.
People say, I don't. Or maybe I did, but wow, that's so interesting. I never even stopped to think about that.
Yeah.
How many times do you ask somebody something and they say, I never even really thought about that?
Oh yeah, people, all kinds of people have opinions. Then you ask them if they really think it, and they're like, I
Right?
guess I never really thought about it.
We've talked about that with, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so it's even as simple as just stopping for a second and saying, wow, do I even really think that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I don't anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did your, because I guess was this around the same time? I'm like, how did your training with coaching impact how you approached motherhood?
So before my dad died, I told him that going to social work school was the best training, second best training to being a parent that I didn't even know I needed. The first being growing up in my home with my parents.
Yeah.
Because I definitely did a lot of what my parents did, but there were things that I definitely didn't do that they did because I wanted to do it my way or I knew better. It was just different, right? But coaching, again, kind of changed everything because I lead with seek first to understand, right? As a parent, we have so many hopes and dreams and ideas for our kids, but they're their own people, right? You know, it's one thing when they're 6 months old or 3 months old or 8, but I have 14-year-old kids now. You know, I'm not going to get anywhere by telling them what needs to be done or you have to do it this way. It's just not going to work. It's just not going to work.
That might trigger some people.
Yeah, I'm sure it will trigger some people, and that is
but
fine.
It's true, yeah.
But that's been my experience. I tell my husband this all the time. You catch more bees with honey.
Yeah.
Right? Than like trying to, I don't even know what the rest of that whole phrase is.
Yeah.
And the times when I say to them, no, we're going to do it this way, or I really need you to, they stand up and they listen, because they even told me this yesterday. Well, when you say, it was my daughter in particular. Yeah. She's like, you never tell me, you never really comment on my outfits. So I know when you do comment, wow, mommy really means it.
Yeah.
So that's what's worked for me. But parenting is so personal.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting because I feel like you're so like just regulated. Like you're just so like calm. Like, you know, like a lot of so that calm, I come in out like it allows me to release, because you're like, I'm usually having to be the calm person, and then I'm with you, I'm like, she's so regulated, I'm like I'm getting unhinged over here, you know. And like I don't know, I just think I watch you navigate all these life experiences. I'm like, how is she so like calm? And like I mean, the thing is that you are surrounded by strong personalities. Like your family are very intelligent, strong personalities. And like, you're so just like regulated and calm within, I think, like all the energy, you know?
Thank you. I think I have to be. Yeah.
And I also think, look at your family unit, and I think it's so cool because, I mean, I grew up in a family of very big, strong, opinionated personalities. And I look at our dynamics, and it was just so much like, and I know every family has their stuff, but you guys are also so opinionated and like big personalities, and you're very cohesive. Like there's like a calmness still to it, you know? And I'm like, this is so interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm just like curious how that gets cultivated, you know? And I think so much of it is like you're not reactive.
Yeah, no, because that, especially with kids, right? That just gets more, it adds more fuel to the fire. And that's not who I am. Because a different version of me would have been reactive.
What version of you?
I think a teenage version of me.
So when did you become not reactive?
Probably in my late 20s, early 30s. Yeah, I just kind of therapy really helped.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably around
what
then.
What part of therapy? Like, was there something you realized? Or do you think just like talking through things and having space helps?
Talking through things and wisdom. Also becoming more comfortable with who I am as a person. That also helps. I mean, I just learned this the other day, but I'm telling all of my women friends because I think it's fascinating. So this whole, perimenopausal, menopausal phase, they call the 40s and the 50s the fuck it's, because you just don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Well, there's a real reason. It's because our estrogen drops. Okay. When our estrogen is higher, when we're procreating, we want to be pleasing and appeasing to people because we need them. We need other people to procreate.
Yeah.
But as we get older, we don't need anybody anymore because we've already had our babies.
Yeah.
Right. So you're like, well, my estrogen's going.
Yeah.
Biologically. And fuck it, I don't care anymore. And it's not that I don't care anymore. It's just that I'm way more true to myself.
Yeah. Yeah, but I also think you're like that before this phase.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm curious. I don't really know why I'm going this direction, but it keeps coming
Go
up.
for it.
Okay, we both love human design.
Yeah.
What did that open up for you? Why do you think you were so drawn to that?
Oh my gosh, because it was, I could go on, and I don't know.
When the sacral response.
Right, exactly. I don't know a tenth of what you know, but I know
you know a lot.
The very basics.
Yeah.
It was the first personality, any sort of those like design quizzes, whatever it is, that actually made sense to me. It all of the puzzle pieces came together.
And what did you realize? And how has that shifted how you live your life?
Well, for one, right, the sacral response. So if I don't feel it in my body, it's a no for me. And that, I mean, I remember when you told me how to even look for that with the and I do that all the time when I'm vibing with something.
Yeah.
But if I'm not, oh gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if it's a hell yes, it's an absolute hell yes. And if it's anything but that, it's a no.
Yeah.
And I've learned that explains volumes. And then a lot of the nuances, if I, go into some gates or I read about, I don't know, whatever it is, like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
The reason why I love it is because it makes so much sense, and it is absolutely unique to me, right? Based on my birth date and the time and where I was born. Yeah, it just explains so much.
How do you think that understanding is helpful through the lens of like leadership?
Because you know yourself in different ways, forward facing and, the shadows, right? So when you are leading, you're conscious of what's obvious, but you're also aware of what's less obvious and how that might be driving or showing up or informing some of your decisions that you don't even really understand. Because so much of leading is by feeling and reading the room and that intangibleness. And so when you have an understanding and there's a tool behind you that you can just sort of reference or even check in with or verify. Yeah, it's incredibly validating and it feels supportive. In a way that other tools might not or other resources might not.
Why do you think that is? Because it's like so accurate, or like because it gives you action steps, or like what do you think is so supportive?
Because it's unique and custom to you, right? Now, obviously, it can't predict the future and all of that kind of stuff, but it's a place to reference that just kind of explains a little bit more in depth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like we talk about, if we're talking about health or we're talking about business or like relationship or whatever, we always somehow find a way. It's your open throat. Yes, it gotta be that two line. Back. Always, like everything suddenly makes, it's my quad right. Like, I think I'm cold thirst. Like I gotta drink iced coffee today. Like everything comes back. It's like, and I think for me, as you're talking, I'm like, a lot of these tools see me so deeply. And when you're someone who's holding space for a lot of people, like, to, even if it's a tool, it's not even another person, like that means so much to you to be like, I'm seen so deeply by this and held by this. And like, it is giving permission to put my oxygen mask on first. I think there's another kind of like emotional aspect to that of like why I love those systems so much.
Yeah, it's validating and honoring of ourself.
Working with the women you work with, what do you find are the most common blocks or questions?
Well, we talked about one, right? Getting that sort of feeling or place of being stuck or overwhelmed or feeling ineffective, right? It's fleeting. Sometimes fleeting isn't 5 seconds. Sometimes it's a day or a week or even a month, but it happens to everyone. It's no matter how skilled and how gifted we are, we all just have those moments. Self-doubt creeps in. We can't not, because we're human. And I think that it's a thing that we talk about all the time, but we also forget. And then we talk about it again, is we're human. And sometimes our brains and sometimes life and sometimes no matter who you're talking to, the expert, whoever you are, in conversation with, we're just here. We're doing the best we can in Earth School, and this too shall pass. every day is a different day.
Yeah.
You wake up and some days you feel amazing and some days you're like, no, I need five cups of coffee. Yeah. Every day is a different day. Right.
At me. Well, I think like what you're hitting on, I feel like it's like people have a misunderstanding of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And confidence doesn't have to mean you never doubt yourself or you don't have any fear.
Right.
You know? So I think to me, that's like kind of the key factor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Confidence, self-trust.
Mm-hmm.
I trust that I'm going to get through this. Might not be pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Might not be the way that I want it to, but I trust that I'm going to get through this because I always have before.
Yeah.
Yeah. And staying the course with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
With the stuckness piece, what do you think is at the root of that?
I think it's a battle of internal wills. I think it's ego trying to trump intuition. And yeah, or you've chosen a path and you're halfway down it and you realize, oh, wow, I made a mistake, or this just doesn't feel right anymore.
Yeah.
And, you know, how to pull the eject button. Yeah.
I think you're right. And I think when you're in that, like, I know, like we've talked about this with situations I've been in, for example, like I think we all go through this where I'm like so deep in it and I feel so stuck and it's not a day, it's like months or like, and I can at my core know there's somewhere in here it's my mind / my ego versus my intuition, but I am so in it, I don't know how to pull out what my intuition is saying. And sometimes you're so in it, you feel like nothing, I'm not hearing anything. I'm so disconnected. It's like, what can people do if they're in that space to start to get clarity?
Some of the obvious ones are the simplest, right? I mean, literally walk away. Go for a walk.
But what if you can't walk away? What if it's your life?
But I don't mean like leave it behind, but I mean, go for a walk.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Phone a friend and go do something that is totally different than what you're doing at this particular moment. If you're in the middle of a project, I don't know, go water your tomato plants. I mean, it sounds so simple, but getting out of your head and going to do something that really takes up very little brain space, knowing what you need, right? And it's different for everybody. Some people love to be with other people and they love to, you know, go and let off some steam, but other people really need to retreat and kind of be by themselves. But you've got to get out of your head and just kind of break the pattern, for one. And then two, on some level, you have to know, maybe this is when you phone the friend, where the friend can give you perspective that says, you've been here before, you've figured it out, it's going to work itself out. You just kind of have to trust, you know? And it doesn't mean that you're walking away from your life. You're still proceeding down the path, but you loosen the grip a little bit and you kind of pull back. Because this too shall pass. Yeah. A lot easier said than done when you're in it. But from my experience, even with my own self, and you know this, we take it so seriously. And I think to a fault we do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you're a good person to ask. How do you think I move through my stuckness patterns?
Yeah, I was going to ask you this question.
What have you witnessed in me?
This is a loaded question.
I can tell you what I think, but yeah, we'll unleash the load.
I mean, there's so many times when we'll have a conversation, right? And I will say, "What did your pendulum say?" And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't ask my pendulum, right? You know, like, well, that's obvious, number one. Or what does your gut say? And this is when you're further into it. And I don't know. I can't access it. And always, is that true? And you'll say, no, I know. Yeah. Right?
I know.
You know. You know. And then there are those moments where it's just so earthy and it's so egoic that you just sometimes have to, it's like watching a child tantrum,
Yeah.
right? You just have to let them go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you love them, you hug them. I'm going to be here, babe. But
Yeah.
when you're done,
Yeah.
you know, then you can come find me.
Yeah.
Right? You're safe. You're not going to hurt yourself or
Yeah.
anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, it's okay. You're going to work through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing temper tantrums and Stacey's like, you're going to be fine. No, but I think like I have to, I'm so much of like my experience in this world is in my head,
Yeah.
you know, and like a lot of the conversations I'm having more non-physical conversations and physical conversations. And I think it's also a split definition. I'm like, I have to like talk it out and move it out and move the energy. And I do think there's something very real to like, if we're on a long walk and I'm like talking about it, I'm moving the energy by just talking about it and we're physically moving. It's like by the end of the 5 miles, we've gotten somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, or even if like I think we haven't, the next day I did because I like moved it out, you know? And I think that for me, it's really helpful to have people around me to just like ask good questions.
Yeah.
You know, and then I like it's like, you know, did you ask your guides or what is your, it's like when you say it that simply, okay, I guess. Right. I guess I do have some guidance, right? Yeah. Or even I think just getting to the bottom of like, what do I really want? I think that's a question that a lot of people struggle with. Like, what do you really want? And I know I'm the same. And having someone outside of me to ask me questions that help reflect back what I actually want. Like you kind of have to like pull it out of me by asking the right question, like nudge me there.
Yeah.
Which usually starts with a lot of what I don't want. Like, no, I don't want to do that. No, it's like, and eventually we get to what I do want and like asking those questions like, well, what's worked? Well, what feels good? Well, what does your sacral say? And like, I think through that, I get back to, you know, my own inner knowing.
It's a lot of it is just remembering, right? And we're not very effective rememberers by ourselves.
Yeah.
Which is why having a friend you can trust or a coach or whoever it is, that person to ask you those questions because they're the same questions over and over again, probably the same answers, but you're going through something different. It's a different moment in time.
Yeah.
So you're going to remember something differently or it's going to feel different. It's perspective.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say something that I have certainly learned from you has been the value of simplicity. Like I tend to not do that. I tend to overcomplicate everything. And I know I'm not the only person like listening to this who's an overthinker. And like, I don't know how I get over there from here, you know?
We all do it. But I will say when you get to the end of the decision-making process, the decision you make is often simple.
Oh yeah.
For sure.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Well, I guess I'm wondering from this is like a genuine question.
Yeah.
From your vantage point, do I end up where I started often? Like when I think I'm really stuck, I actually am unsure, but I'm using this as whatever example it serves for people. It's like where I start, is it like from the beginning, I already know what I'm going to do. And then I just need to go through an emotional process of choosing it. Or is it that when I think I'm stuck, I really it hasn't dropped in yet. And then I eventually comes to me when I allow myself to
I think
receive it.
At least I'm thinking now of 2 conversations that we had in April, and the idea had already dropped in, and you started where you ended up at the end, but it took a little like spinning to get there. One was quicker, and the other one was not. But you did get there.
So what's my spinning about? Why do you think I do that? Why do we do that?
I think if I had is it fear? Is it the tantruming? Is it I think again it goes back to that inner battle between our ego and our intuition. Right? It's like, no, right? What else do we have to talk about then?
Well, I know. I gotta have something to talk about. Sam and I were talking about this. The idea that she had been reading a book, and so we're talking about it. And it's no different from like, you know, the classic question if something's in our lives, like how is this serving me?
Mm-hmm.
So for me to figure out the part of me that was, for example, like manifesting health issues, it's like, well, how is it serving me to have health issues? And so classic question that's helped me a lot in my life to see things about why I'm attracting things in or why something's in my life. But she had read this book that took it a step further. And the idea was, it's not just like, how is it serving you? It's the idea that if it's in your reality, this book was saying, you want it. Like it's like, and she was saying, you know how you always say, oh, it's a full sacral yes. The idea is if it's in your reality, you have a full sacral yes to it. Like it's like a kink. It's like, oh, I shouldn't want this, but I do want it. That's why I've attracted it in. And so that unraveled this whole conversation we had about like patterns we have and problems. And we were talking about a certain dynamic with communication, with a relationship, you know, and she was like, you know, so it's like, what part of us loves the loves the struggle with the communication? And I'm like, it's a very fascinating question to explore, because I can say, no, it really bothers me. Like I don't want to convince people. I don't want to deal with that, blah, blah, blah. But then like, if I attract in a scenario where feel like I'm being put in that position, is there a part of me that like actually kind of loves that, you know? And so I think that maybe, you know, there's a little bit of an energetic kink with the spinning. It feels more dramatic to get there.
Yeah, so here's the other, what is coming as you're saying this is, if there wasn't the spinning and there wasn't the kink, what would be there?
Yeah.
Right? You'd be moving quicker. And sometimes we're just not ready.
Yes.
Right? So I think the kinks serve a purpose.
Yeah. Takes longer.
Yeah, it takes longer.
We were talking earlier about, like in between recording, I was saying how there's been some things business-wise recently where I call Kaylin and Lo and I'm like, gotta figure this out. And it's like this whole like 4-day, we're on the phone, like getting to the bottom of it, emotional up and down experience. And then later I'll bring it up to my boyfriend. I'm like, oh yeah, I was trying to figure this out. I just say it really simply. And he's like, oh, you should do this. And what he says is what it took me 4 days to like get to. And I was saying to Kaylin, I'm like, I guess I should just ask him. It'd save me 4 days. But she was like, no, but I think those 4 days are important because you emotionally have to get on board.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other piece. It's like, I have learned just to give myself grace. Like you're a space where I can let myself move through that. And I don't have that many spaces like that. And I've learned, like, for a long time, I never let myself spin in front of anybody else. Or even at all.
Yeah.
But then I learned to give myself grace of like letting myself be in that, because what that allows is like my inner child to feel free. One, it allows me to feel like loved and seen and just held. Two, it's actually getting all parts of me on board with things. Like, because I might mentally know this is the right move to make, but maybe emotionally or energetically I'm not on board, or vice versa, right? Like maybe energetically or intuitively I'm like, this is it, but the rest of my bodies, right? My physical body, my emotional body are not on board yet. And I think some of that like spinning, it's like, I got to get everything there.
And that whole process is a very feminine process, right?
Yeah, you're right.
And then when you make the decision, of course he has the answer. He lives in the masculine, right? When you get to your answer 4 days later, then you slide into the masculine and you go and you execute. Yeah. So I think all of that is a very feminine response.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, I'm like, that's the thing. People are like, well, don't you just know the answer? And I'm like, yeah, but like in my own life, just because I know the answer doesn't mean I'm going to do it.
Right.
Like, to me, it's kind of skipping a step. Like, for other people, I can be like, yeah, this is the answer. It's so easy. But I think you're right of like, I have to integrate that feminine process of it.
Yeah.
It's like too easy.
And there are ways to, when you like find yourself in that spinning space, maybe that's the cue for, okay, you know, now what? You know, if your feminine is processing and spinning, and she's taking the time and she's taking the 4 days. Maybe that's representative of, okay, now what would the masculine part say, or how can I bring that part on, right? It's almost like the tell, if 100%. You will. Yeah.
Well, and I also think like, it's like we spend so much time, how do I get unstuck?
Yeah.
Instead of like, but what's the beauty in the part where we're stuck? Like that's like the beauty in the void, right? Yes. And so I think about like who I became in the spinning. In the 4 days, all of the realizations I had about myself, and even just to use this most recent thing we got to business-wise as an example, after that, I was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And I feel really good about it. And I brought it back up to Sam, and she goes, and I was asking for her advice related to it. And she goes, look, I can tell you, but I've given you this advice once a year, every year since I've known you, and you don't listen to it and you don't follow it and you tell me I'm wrong. And she's like, so I don't want to do it again. I go, I know. I said, but this is the first time I actually am fully on board, like ready to do it. And I was resisting it even though I knew it was right, I was resisting it because I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
Emotionally, you know? So I think and when I look at, hey, what made me ready? It's like I became someone through that spinning.
Yeah.
Where I'm not always, just because I know an answer, I haven't always like become her.
Of course.
Who can carry it out.
Because knowing up here and feeling it anywhere else in our body,
yeah,
they're two totally different things.
Yeah.
Totally different things.
Yeah, and which one leads?
Yeah. I mean, you asked the question, early on. Yeah. It was about like waking up 15. How can I, you know it when you know it. You feel it when you feel it. And it's not that
you're like, a baby's actually here now.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe that's the thing, right? It's like something happens where you've become the person where like, this is what I do.
Yeah. Your identity shifts.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a session with someone who might listen to this podcast yesterday. And she was talking about wanting to, she wants to work less and make more money. She's working way too hard. She's working a ton and not making enough money. And so we're like looking at opening up financial freedom. And I'm, it's an intuitive read. And I go, okay, well, when you have the financial freedom that you want, what are you going to do with it? Like, what do you want to do? What is your life like? And so she describes what she's going to do. And I go, is that any different than your life right now? And she goes, no. And I go, well, then why would anything change? Because there's no need for anything to change, right? If you're saying that if you 10x your income, everything in your life would be exactly the same. You're going to have the same daily routine. It's like nothing's different. You just want more money. There's no actual vibrational need for money to change. It's like the second you ground into like how your life is going to be different, now there's a real like need for things to change energetically.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that happens with like, now that we're talking about this, like with what's going to make me wake up earlier. I mean, for how long have I wanted to wake up early?
Forever.
Everybody hates me for this. Like literally everybody. It's just like an ongoing joke with everybody in my life. I'm like, I'm going to become a morning person. Everybody. No, you're not. But I'm like, there's actually been no real need for me to.
Yeah, it's a desire.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's been nothing that's like forced me to become, and by force, like that's like not like, it doesn't have to be something external, but it's like an internal. Yeah, maybe it's like a head desire, but if I haven't done it yet, there's not really an embodied, like, this is a need for me to be happy. It's just an idea. And I think that's kind of
and it's an idea that other people say is great and logically you can get behind, but it's not resonating.
Yeah.
It's not feeling, and it may or may not ever come.
I know.
But that's how people show up differently from one day to the next, right?
Well, yeah.
I mean, how many times do you hear the story about somebody who's an alcoholic and like, yep, just never had another drink again?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was like me with processed food.
Yeah.
Right? People ask like how I changed. I'm like, I really 0 to 100. Like I quit drinking.
Yep.
I went from straight 100% processed junk food to just a paleo whole foods diet overnight. And it wasn't hard. Like,
no.
It wasn't hard. And so that was interesting. But I think it's like, even with this waking up early thing, like my spirit guides have told me the answer is waking up early for like 3 years and I still haven't done it. And I just think it's about exemplifying the point that like, as humans, we know Like we can get the guidance, we can get the advice,
Mm-hmm.
but it has to come from, like, there's a reason that hasn't landed for me yet of like, yeah, I know you're telling me to do that and I know that's right, but there's some piece of me that doesn't believe that's the thing. And I think it's like, I have to believe that's a thing to actually take action on it. Like it has to come from my full choice. It's kind of like, you know, when you talk to men, like it has to be their idea.
Yes.
And it's the masculine part of us.
Yeah, right.
It like has to be our idea.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just a little.
And even more than believing, it really does have to, and because of you, who you are, it has to come from within.
Yeah.
It has to be that deep.
Is that an Aries thing, or do you think that's a general thing?
I think it's a general thing. Okay. But yeah, I think that with Aries, we bring the fire. So yeah, I mean, you know.
Yeah.
It's more enhanced.
You're a different Aries. You're a calmer Aries.
you know, that has taken practice and diligence and a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
It doesn't work if I'm reacting. It doesn't work for anyone, and it definitely doesn't work for myself.
Yeah.
There are times where I absolutely want to go bananas on my kids and lose my marbles, but I'm not gonna, it's just not gonna
be helpful.
It's not gonna be helpful.
Well,
the hard way.
I learn a lot from you all the time.
Oh my gosh. I learn oodles from you. So I have to tell you, my daughter thinks it's hilarious that we're friends.
I know.
Given our age difference. All the time. She's like, Mommy, I just don't understand why Christina wants to hang out with you. You're so old. I'm like, listen, girl, someday you'll get it.
Yeah.
I mean, you teach me constantly about
you.
so many other ways of being on this planet. I think I'm half the person I am because of what you've taught me in the past few years.
Thank you.
Seriously.
Well, likewise.
Yeah.
I think that it's interesting how much we like mirror in different ways. Yeah. And I think that actually the age gap is like part of what makes it work so well.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Because it's like a totally different, I don't know.
I agree. Yeah. It's kind of the least interesting thing about us, maybe to other people. It's interesting at least to a 14-year-old. Yeah. But I think it just goes to show that there are so many different people on this planet and who have lived different lifetimes. And when you find somebody you vibe with, I don't care who they are or where they're from or what they look like. I mean, you just hold on to those people.
Yeah.
100%. You have to. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like when we were going to Coeur d'Alene and my boyfriend was like, I remember I said something, I forget what I said about your life, but he was like, he thought you were like 28. Like, and then he was like, what the? I was like, well, no, she's like a mom. Like, you know, she's kids.
Really?
Like, he's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I was like, you know, like, it works. Yeah. But I think I have more in common with you than I do a lot of other people my age.
Oh, totally.
So, and you have more in common with me.
Way more.
You know?
Yeah.
So it works out.
Yeah. Like I said, when you find your people, you find them.
And I really do feel like the reason I joined Beauty Counter was to meet you. Yeah. Like, and I met a lot of great people. I mean, I think we both agree, like the people that were in our little group or whatever. Like so many great people. Yeah. But obviously I'm closest to you.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
And I'm like, that was a contract. I remember sitting down at the table and I was like, oh,
yeah.
You.
And I showed up to that. There was one seat left and it was next to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like, who's this chick?
I remember. I knew who you were.
Oh, you did?
But yeah, I knew who you were because I think I was at IIN or done with IIN by that moment. So I knew you from your food and health and nutrition stuff before. Yeah.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
And look where we are now.
And here we are.
Pulled me up to North County.
Yeah.
It's probably why I had to move back to North County.
Yes.
Because you're probably manifesting it.
Are you kidding me? Yes. I've been doing all kinds of stuff for the past year.
Candle rituals.
Gone. Totally. Crystals, everything.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited.
Yes.
So you have a podcast.
I have a podcast. I'm rebooting that. That is the first time I've said that publicly.
Great.
I miss it. I miss having conversations. Conversations are easy for me. So I'm all about, in this phase of life, doing what's easy.
Yeah.
Not without effort, but like, just go with the flow. Like if your flow is talking, that is just what's going to work for me. Yeah. It's my superpower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's where you expand me.
Yeah.
Doing what's easy and simple. So, what's the podcast? Where can people listen?
Wherever podcasts, Apple, Google, wherever, Spotify, not Google, but, it's called Where to Next. And that is a holding. That is my old name, but because I'm doing things differently, I'm not letting potential roadblocks stop me. I will be rebranded at some point, but I just want to have the conversations. And so that will be coming soon. And I also write on Substack weekly.
My favorite newsletter.
Yeah.
How can people sign up for it?
Then go to Substack.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll link it in the show notes.
Put everything there. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
I'm endlessly grateful for you and our friendship.
Mutual.
And I'm so happy we finally did this.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.